School District 832 Mahtomedi Public Schools special meeting to order. Due to the declared health pandemic and declared state of emergency, this school board special meeting, will be held by conference call or interactive technology in accordance with Minnesota State Statute 13D021. This meeting is being live streamed, but will also be posted on our website for people to view later. So with that, I'm looking for a roll call of attendance.
Mike Chevalier.
Aye.
Kevin Donovan.
Aye.
Julie McGraw, aye. Lucy Payne.
Here.
Judy Schwartz.
Aye, here.
Stacy Stout, sorry. Okay.
All right. Thank you. We're all here. Thank you so much for making time tonight to put the special meeting into your schedules. I know it's a very busy time for many of you, so I really appreciate your dedication to your roles as school board members. So next on our agenda, we have approval of the agenda.
We'll move.
Second.
You. Moved by Mike, seconded by Kevin. Any discussion? Okay, roll call vote on the agenda, please.
Mike Chevalier.
Aye.
Kevin Donovan.
Aye.
Julie McGraw, aye. Judy Schwartz.
Aye.
Stacy Stout.
Aye.
And Lucy Payne.
The chair's aye, motion carries. So we have adopted an agenda. The first item is discussion information items, which we have none of this evening. We have one action item, which is the adoption of a base learning model for the 2020-2021 school year. Before I turn it over to Barb, I want to take a minute to thank Barb specifically for all her work with her team, all the administrators and other staff that have been coming together all summer long, working very hard to dig through information that changes on a regular basis. Every time Barb and I have had a conversation, there's been a new piece of information from the Department of Health, the Department of Education, the governor's office. So we are really working with a lot of changing information, and they've done an excellent job, Barb and her entire team, digging through that information, making sense of that information, and sharing that information. I want to thank board members because I know many of us have been in constant communication with Barb and others about questions, concerns, about thinking about the fall school year and reflecting on the end of last academic year. I want to thank our teachers. I know many of our teachers have taken advantage of professional development opportunities that have been made available to them either through the district or other sources to continue their growth and learning. This happens every summer. Even those teachers who have just taken some time to have a mental break are still thinking, still reflecting about how the year ended last year and the situation they'll be walking into in the fall. Our teachers are very reflective, ongoing learners, and I thank them for that. I'd like to also thank our students. They were wonderful to work with in the spring, and they are resilient young learners who will be ready for the situation that is put in front of them. Finally, I'd like to thank our community members. I know as board members, we received many emails. Community has also been very responsive to surveys and sharing their perspectives, their information, and it makes us better. So I really appreciate the time many of our community members have taken to share their ideas, their concerns with us. So this learning plans could continue to evolve and get better. Together, we are better. So with that, are there other general comments from the board before we get started? All right, then I'm going to turn it. I would like to say what I would like to do. Oh, I'm sorry, Kevin, go ahead. Thank you.
Well, I guess I wanted to echo your sentiments, and I also really wanted to thank, I know a number of people are here tonight. I just really want to thank everyone from the community for letting us know and writing and expressing thoughts, concerns, suggestions, continuous improvement ideas. And for me as a board member, I'm very thankful for those inputs. For a lot of time on the board, I feel like I think it's the Maytag repair guy. You never get the phone call or the correspondence. And I'm just really grateful that we've had these inputs, because otherwise we do what we own, our own personal ideas and the data suggests, but it's really great to have the stakeholder input. So thank you all for that.
Julie, did you have a comment also you want to share from the meeting last night?
Oh, yes, I did. I just wanted to share a quote that they shared at the School Board Association summer seminar last night from David Horsager that was I thought really appropriate for us, that people trust the clear and distrust the ambiguous. And for that, we're sorry.
All right, before I turn it over to Barb, I do want to talk about the structure of how this will work tonight. We have
Barb, Lucy. So we did the discussion before we made another motion. So we need a motion and a second for the action item.
Right, we're not quite ready there yet. I want to talk about how we're going to structure that action item, but then you're right, we'll have a motion for that in a long discussion. So thank you for that reminder.
Okay.
So the action item is to adopt this learning model, but I know there's many other questions also. So the first thing we need to do is have a presentation from Barb after we make this motion for the model around the health and safety of our students. After we've adopted a model, then we'll have an opportunity as a board to ask additional questions about the specific model we've selected in order to help us understand and the community to understand what's happening there. We have a very large group on with us today, meaning we have 19 panelists. So there are 19 people who will be, in total, us and others, who will be supporting this presentation. And so it's gonna be very important that board members wait for me to call on you, and we will direct all our questions directly to Barb as our superintendent, and then she will direct those out to her team and who is best to answer that question. So one other thing I do want to share with the group is a quote from one of our community members who wrote to us an email, because I think it's important for us to remember, is that the optimal solution that everyone wants, meaning safe, all in-person learning, is just like it used to be, is simply not a viable option due to the continued pandemic. I think that's important, that all the models we're going to look at tonight, none of them are what we were doing on February 1st last year. So with that, I would like to entertain a motion to adopt, well, actually we can't do a motion because we have a resolution after we have a recommendation. We need a presentation first, and then we'll look for a motion. Okay, so Barb, if you will do your presentation, and at the end of your presentation, I'll look to a board member to give a motion at that point before we go into the discussion. Yep, thank you, Stacy.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. And thank you, Lucy, for your introduction. You took a lot of my thank yous. And so I will I do want to just reiterate a little bit, though, and I don't want to postpone this conversation too long, but the team that you have that you're going to be hearing from today is just exceptional. This is a group that really spent just so much time, energy, thinking about how this could possibly work in a very difficult situation that might absolutely feel like nothing is right. But this group just kept showing up, being positive, talking about what if, talking about the options, and always keeping our students at the center. So I couldn't be more proud of this crew and to be part of this community, because as both Kevin and Lucy mentioned, we heard messages of support throughout this. We've been hearing lots of questions, lots of suggestions, and at one point, there was a community member who apologized for, feeling as passionately as she did. And I just want all the families out there and all the parents out there to know that we really do believe that you have been and you will continue to push us to be better. And I don't ever want anyone to feel bad about being emotional or upset, because you're talking about your children, and we know that, and we feel it too. So please know that. I'm really thankful for the teachers who have been really working on this on and off again all summer, and thinking about the different ways that this can be as well, that this can look as well. So thank you to everyone. And and with that, I will get going. Some of these slides that you're going to see today are slides that you've seen before, but because, as Lucy mentioned, things change on a regular basis in terms of our guidance. And so I want to make sure that what we're sharing with you is the most up-to-date guidance that we have. The plan that we have, sorry. There we go. So what we'll do today is we're going to give you an overview of the planning process. We're going to present a starting learning model. We're going to make a recommendation for the base learning model, and I'll call it the likely base learning model. The reason I'm going to call it the likely base learning model is that we do know things could change before the start of the school year, but our best thinking right now is what we're going to present to you today. We'll also give you an overview of the other learning models because we do know that, or we anticipate that we will be in different learning models throughout the school year. We'll share our next steps, and then we have some resources and additional information at the end of this presentation. These are our components that informed our planning process. We were given back in June, we were told that we needed to come up with 3 learning models, and that started our work. Well, actually what started our work was feedback from families in June regarding our distance learning experience from families and staff. And, but then in June, we were given more direction from the Department of Education and the Department of Health. On July 30th, we got some new guidance that was a little different than what we had started with from Governor Walz in the emergency executive order. And so we have incorporated that into our plan. And throughout this, we have been receiving feedback in different forms from families and staff that we've also used to create these plans. So our 3 learning models, as you know, is model 1, in-person, 2 is hybrid, which is a mix of learning in-person and distance learning, and then model 3 is distance learning 2.0. We're calling it distance learning 2.0 because we do know that it needs to be different than what we did in the spring, and we do have some things to share with you about how that will look different based on our feedback from families and staff. We have built these models so that we can transition between these easily. We don't want a situation where we have to stop for 2 weeks and reassemble and restructure. And so that is why the models that we're sharing with you are in place so that we can move between the 3. And I want you also to know that as we go through this, that families may request a distance learning plan if they do not wish to participate in person. That is always a possibility. And students who need to quarantine are going to be able to use distance learning during their exclusion period. So we have that worked in regardless of whether we're in person, hybrid, or distance learning. That is worked into all of our plans. So our planning process, we received guidance from MDE, MDH, and the governor. The MDH guidance, the public health guidance, really set out those requirements in terms of safety measures, cleaning, physical interactions, physical distancing. And this was a big part of our work in determining our different models. You'll see in these pictures that we do have a few classrooms set up that are set up for physical distancing, just to give you a picture of what it is that it would look like in one of those models. So the emergency executive order and safe learning plan, they grant, and again, this was new. We thought the governor was going to tell us what model to open in, but on July 30th, we learned that local authorities do have the ability to designate a starting learning model, and but based on certain criteria, which we are going to go over with you. So one of the things that we needed to do that was new as of the 30th was to assemble an incident command team to serve as an advisory group to the school board and the superintendent. On this team included administrators, teachers, parents, students, paraprofessional, the supervisor of buildings and grounds, district licensed school nurse, and school board members. And so the purpose of this committee was to go over a number of the health and safety measures that are required from MDH and the ways that we are going to address them. We also reviewed county level incident data and those MDH learning model selection parameters that were new on the 30th for us. We also considered local epidemiology behind the county level data that was provided by Washington County. And then again, we needed to evaluate the ability to implement the required recommended health best practices in the context of the different learning models. So we talked about that with all of the people on this incident command team. So this group we will be assembling on occasion throughout the school year to use as that advisory group, because they all possess a different perspective regarding the learning experience. And so that is why that group exists. So the first part of this, I'm going to talk a little bit, but I'm also going to ask Megan McMahon to join me. So if you want to bring her in or unmute and join us to talk, she's our licensed school nurse, our district licensed school nurse, who will be talking to us about some of the details. But under executive order from the governor, the most recent one, one factor that we need to use that's going to guide our learning model decision is this chart that I'm sharing with you, and it's the number of cases per 10,000 over 14 days by county of residence, in this case, Washington County. So this was new for us. While we thought we were going to have 3 different models, in this case, there are 5 different ways of organizing ourselves. And so this was something that was a little bit different for us. We are going to receive the biweekly case rate. That's the 14-day case rate on Thursdays. And with that, then the order and the plan outline new childcare staffing, funding, and communication terms within that executive order. And so we'll be going through those things as well. But the thing I wanted to point out here, and I'm asking Megan to join me on, is one of the things that we look at, again, is that number of cases over 14 days. I will mention to you that in looking at our data, so the most recent data we have is 15, as of today, for the 2 weeks from July 12th through the 25th, we are at 15.63. So that puts us right in that 10 to 19 range, but we are trending upward. We had been at 12.71, then 14.84, and the most recent one is 15.63. So one of the questions I know I've heard is so that's our Washington County data. One of the questions I know I've heard is, should we consider Ramsey County data also? And how is it that we should use this, this data? What's the best way to use this data? And I'd like Megan McMahon to talk a little bit about her conference with Washington County in that regard. Megan, are you available? Are you on?
She's on but muted.
Okay.
Thank you, Megan.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so Lynn Beaker and I spoke with the Washington County epidemiologist this week, and some of the takeaway points that he had from this conversation was that he was saying that the current community spread that's currently in Washington County, the primary spread is through community spread, and there are no localized outbreaks within Washington County. So he also shared the Washington County COVID statistics dashboard, and we took a look at that. And currently in Washington County, the highest population rates of infection is the ages of 18 to 34, that population. He said when analyzing the county numbers, to look at the county as a whole and not just our immediate community, because people travel all over the county. They don't just stay within their community bubble. And he was also advising that we should keep a pulse on Ramsey County, and it's for the same reason that we would be watching our county as a whole. It's that people in our community are going to be going to Ramsey County as well for shopping, to see friends, family, whatever. So those were the key points that he was advising on. And one of the interesting things that he said too, just through contact tracing within the community, He was saying that he's not surprised by the highest rates of infection being in that 18 to 34 population, because now people are out and about so much more. And when you're contact tracing, now when they have one person with confirmed COVID, they have about 20 different close contacts that they have to go through and have quarantine and talk to. Whereas a few months back, people had maybe one or two close contacts. So that just shows you how widespread the community spread can and most likely will continue to be.
Thank you, Megan.
Yep.
And so again, this is the first, so looking at the numbers was one of the first things that we talked about with our team to look at what are those trends and how does it fall within this chart in terms of what learning model is being recommended.
So Barb, since we were told to watch Ramsey County also, I just want to interject here that Ramsey County right now for their data that was released today is at 19.65.
Yep, and their trend was 13, in our same time frame was 13.68, 16.99, and then 19.65. So also trending up as well. Okay, so as part of our planning process, we also looked for feedback from families. So we did take into account surveys that from our distance learning experiences in terms of helping us plan for distance learning experiences in the spring. We surveyed our families at each of the school buildings about the scenarios, the three potential scenarios. And we did receive 2,300 responses, which was quite something. So we also conducted some focus groups during the week of July 20th so that we could discuss some of our draft plans and get feedback and questions and things that we hadn't thought of so that we could revise the plans that we're bringing to you today. We also, so on July 24th, we shared the draft that we had with families and then received feedback. Families had the opportunity to give us feedbacks via form there too. During the week of July 27th, principals continue to work with their staff on finalizing school schedules and further developing the details under each plan. So in each case, we were going to staff and then to families, back to staff, back to, so this has been a back and forth all summer in order to land where we are today. So our themes. Health and safety is a big theme that's coming through from both parents and staff. Rigor and engagement, that consistent course and content expectations and feedback regardless of the scenario that students are on. And we're looking for that. Schedule and structure. We heard that it was very difficult in the distance learning format when students did not have that schedule, that structure to follow. And so we have worked that into our plan as well. We know we want to maximize face-to-face learning and also in-person opportunities as we can. So I'm talking about in-person versus face-to-face because some of it is going to need to be remote, but we still want that face-to-face learning and instruction. We want stability and predictability for staff, families, and students as much as we can, which is why we created scenarios that could go back and forth among the different, so we could go back and forth among the different plans. And a very big part of this is the relationships and building relationships between students and their teachers and also peer-to-peer relationships. We know that these things, this was a really important part to our students and our staff and families is that when they're not together, how is it that we are going to really develop those relationships and keep kids connected? So this informed the continued development of our plan. So in our feedback from staff, we had some concerns as well, and I'm going to ask Nicole Flessner, our Supervisor of Human Resources, to join us to talk about that.
Hi everyone, thanks Barb. My name is Nicole Flessner in Human Resources, and we just have some information to help share how we got feedback from our staff primarily. And so we sent out a survey initially earlier in the spring and really wanted to get a good handle on where what staff were thinking about in terms of health and safety for a return to work in the fall. And so we really looked at some questions that were open-ended and allowed people to really identify some areas that they were most concerned about at that time. And so we did have a really good response rate. And I just wanted to note that we had probably roughly close to 80% of our staff took some time and were honest about their comments. And it was very helpful for our process to see where people were thinking to help guide our planning. So we identified 4 main areas of concern for our staff. And at that time, that was a big item that we had listed, was the use or misuse of face coverings or face masks. And some comments that we did receive, it wasn't as much with adults, but it also came out about just the inconsistency with students and how different mask wearing with students could be with the different age ranges that we have, all the way from E12 in our district with students. So that's changed a little bit with the mandates, but that was a big concern that we found at the end of June. We also had a few other areas that came out in our survey with public health regulations not being followed. The concern with having in-person interactions with others in the buildings and how that would work as we had our planning figured out. And then another big one that we're still working on as well is just the overall cleaning and disinfecting in classrooms and offices and places where people are. So those were the main themes that we had from our survey earlier in the summer. Our building principals also had listening sessions with their staff, and that was, I think, the week of July 13th. And that was a good opportunity for us to share some preliminary thoughts and planning, and then staff were able to just ask questions and so, or offer feedback of things that maybe we haven't thought of, or questions that we didn't have answered yet that we used to further develop more planning. Last week, there was a survey that went out to our staff for getting a little bit more detailed information in terms of our accommodations. And so initially what we had was about, under our scenario 1, about 7% of staff would consider an accommodation, with about 27% still undecided, and about the same percentages in also scenario 2, which is the hybrid. And so with that information, we sent out a survey to find out what staff would need an accommodation. And so we're working through that process right now. The data that we have is from Tuesday, and I'm still getting more information coming in, but we had 16 teachers at that time and 13 that would need an accommodation to work from home. So although those numbers are Tuesday, we're still working through that. And so then from there, we'll work on our staffing along with our planning for the scenarios. So thank you.
Thanks, Nicole.
Yep.
So based on our staff feedback, our family feedback, our distance learning experience, we established these components as our foundation. And so this is what we start with in terms of what is our foundation so that all of our plans are going to serve these aspects. Relationships that strengthen academic and social emotional growth. Technology, which is access, devices, and training. And I will say that access and devices, we are doing pretty well there. And we are able to have a device for every learner this year for students to bring home. The training, we are working on our training for staff and students, and in some cases for families as well. Instructional rigor and engagement. Scheduling flexibility. Because of our different scenarios and because of our different staffing needs, we are going to need to be flexible in the way we schedule. We want to maximize face-to-face learning opportunities for students who need the most direction and support. We want to have the fewest transitions or the least amount of physical interactions between groups of students. We need structure for parents and students and preparation time for staff. And so in order to do this, if we want, we've talked about wanting to maximize safe in-person and face-to-face learning opportunities, minimizing physical interactions, minimizing activities that demand cleaning that impacts learning time, because we know we're going to need to increase our cleaning routines, and we'll talk about that more later. We need predictability and structure for students and parents for the year, and to minimize the impact of transitioning between scenarios, grow learner independence and student agency, support our workforce and provide support to families who need to return to in-person work, and also provide strong instructional rigor with engagement for students coupled with feedback for students and families. And so as a result of that, there are some operational changes we needed to make for the 2021 school year, which includes adjusting our school start and end times, adjusting the schedules, creating new classroom and school configurations, adjusting our our class sizes and our cohorts, providing devices for all learners and staff, aligning childcare to the school schedule, create systems to use staff very differently, and build a structure that can transition to each scenario quickly based on those COVID-19 metrics. And so regardless of our learning model, at Mahtomedi Public Schools, we're going to provide educational excellence through 5 days a week of continuous learning, consistent course and content expectations, relationships with educators that foster academic and social emotional growth, engagement, and feedback, a structure that supports staff, students, and families to minimize new transitions, and opportunities for academic reflection, exploration, and agency in student learning. So structured distance learning, because I know that's a real question for families too, it's continuous learning every day, online daily instruction with teachers, based on a regular schedule, face-to-face and recorded lessons to provide flexibility, online small group instruction, and independent practice and feedback. So we are about to make a recommendation to you. Here it comes. And all of these components informed our starting learning model recommendation. So I want you to look at that. These are the things that I have just gone over with you. So when we recommend this to you, we're going to be recommending the hybrid learning model for elementary and secondary schools based on all that I have just shared with you. So this hybrid learning model is a mix of in-person and distance learning. And this is what we are recommending as an administration for the start of as our base model for the 2021 school year. And so I'm going to just to let you know why it is that, and I suppose I'll be reiterating, but I'm still going to do it anyway, why it is we're looking at hybrid learning for elementary and secondary school. We really needed to look at multiple measures to make this local decision, including those numbers, but also our staff feedback and safety. Their number one concern is safety. And hybrid model does provide more safety parameters to help ensure that we have staff to help to teach our students. If we were to be in person in elementary, we would not be able to be physically distant. That would be something because our class sizes would be too large to provide that physical distancing of 6 feet. And so that is why we are recommending hybrid for elementary, although the numbers were in that range from the state to be in person. We are recommending hybrid. It's also the case that the numbers are trending upward, and the data I'm sharing with you lags by 2 weeks. And so we are in that, that's another reason we are recommending hybrid. And I think what I'll do is I'll stop talking for a little bit and let our principals talk to you a little bit more about the detail around this. But those are the main reasons that we are recommending hybrid learning for both elementary and secondary to start with. One of the questions might be, why are we not recommending distance learning completely for secondary, for example, as the numbers are climbing? And I'll let the principals talk a little bit about that as well. But one of the foundational components of what we've used to make our plans is building relationships and connections. And we feel like having some time in person will help us with that. And so I am going to turn this over to Susie Prather, one of our elementary principals, to talk about the hybrid model for the elementary.
Good evening. I'm going to be sharing the hybrid for both Wildwood and OH Anderson. We've worked collaboratively to develop this hybrid model. So our school day will look different. It will start at 7:45 and run until 1:15. So it's a little earlier time. We will be having 5 days of continuous learning. So elementary students will be in person 4 of the days in class and learning from a distance 1 of the days. Class sizes, we needed to reduce class sizes. And so we have on an estimate of an average class size of about 23 students. We needed to look at our parameters, and our parameters were to reduce classroom capacity and maintain that 6 feet social distancing. So what will happen each day is there'll be about 17 to 18 kids in their in-person learning and about 5 or 6 learning from a distance. Specialists will be after school in a flexible format using virtual learning, so families can complete their specialist classes in the evening at their where their schedule allows. Our instructional model, the way that it will look when students are in their in-person days, so that's 4 days a week, they'll have that daily instruction from their teacher, small group instruction to meet their individual needs, opportunities for independent practice with that ongoing feedback that happens from a teacher when you're in the class with that teacher. And then on the one distance learning day, when they're learning from home on that one day, they'll have that daily instruction from the teachers, and that opportunity will be either they can watch it live or it can be taped because we want to provide that flexibility. And then students will have that opportunity to practice what the skills that they learned at that time. And our platforms that we're using at the elementary in kindergarten through 2nd at Wildwood would be Seesaw, and at OH Anderson we'll be using Google Classroom. And we will be having childcare after school, so that would be from 1:15 to 5:30 each evening.
Thank you. And to talk about our secondary schedule, I'm sorry, I don't know whether it's going to be Dr. Newbeck. Is that who's coming, Mike Newbeck or Justin Hahn?
Nope.
I'm sorry.
I'm on here, Barb.
Oh, okay, thank you. Justin Hahn is our principal at our high school. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to just give you the overview of what you see up on the screen here, and then Dr. Newbeck will be talking about the specifics with the hybrid model at both the middle school and the high school. And so our school day is going to run from 9 a.m. to 2:30 in this hybrid model. 5 days a week of continuous learning. And so what that looks like is that those students who are in a blue group that are here and the students that are at home on those days would be getting distance learning instruction as well. And so when you take a look at that, all of our secondary students would be in person for 2 days and then distance learning for 3 days a week. School and classroom capacity. So ours are a little bit different than the elementary schools just in regard to our class size. So due to our capacity limits, 4 days a week, on Monday through Thursday, 50% of our students will be in the building each day. And then the other 50% of the students will be engaged in structured learning in a distance learning format. And then on that 5th day, all students will engage in structured face-to-face instruction in a distance learning format, and that'd be checking in with teachers. So again, that structure is really important, and part of the feedback that we heard from parents based on information that came to us from what the experience was for students during our spring. And so having that accountability, having that structure is going to provide, we believe, that engagement, part of that engagement for students as well. And then in distance learning, what that will look like is the platform we're going to be using will be Google Classroom, and the distance learning piece will be continuous learning every day, online, daily instruction with teachers based on a regular schedule again, face-to-face and recorded lessons. Again, that's to provide for that flexibility for both students and then staff, and then online small group instruction and independent practice and feedback. We know that some of the advances with technology, which happened very quickly due to this pandemic, are going to allow for some of that small group breakout and some of the things that the district is going to be providing for teachers in the way of technology. And with that, Dr. Newbeck will show you what that looks like with a graphic.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll do the best I can to explain this graphic. There's a lot of information on there. First of all, students are grouped into 2 groups. They'll be grouped into a blue and a gold group. The blue group will attend in person on Monday and Wednesday. The gold group will attend in person on Tuesday and Thursday, and both groups will attend a synchronous class with teachers from distance learning on Fridays. Again, students will attend 3 periods each week. As you can see, for example, first week, they'll attend periods 1, 3, and 5. The second week, they would attend periods 2, 4, and 6. But of course, students in both groups are engaged in continuous learning for all 5 days. Students will engage in 2 weeks of material per se in 1 week's time. The blocks are 90-minute blocks of instruction. Usually if we were in a 6-period day, it would be about 50-minute classes. Here there would be a 90-minute classes or blocks. Structured distance learning, when they are not in person, will be continuous learning every day, will be a daily instruction with teachers based on a regular schedule, will again be face-to-face or a recorded lesson to provide flexibility for families and students, and include small group instruction or independent practice and feedback. Students in both groups are scheduled and engaged in learning from 9 o'clock until 2:30. It may not be totally straight online, but with practice, feedback from teachers, and direct instruction, they will be online from 9 until 2:30. So I know there's been some questions about why 3 periods a week and not all 6. We feel that we looked at 3 really important areas: feedback and engagement, structure and support through academic balance, and then relationships. So with feedback and engagement, with a 3-period block schedule under the hybrid model, our teachers are able to meet with students twice a week, allowing adequate time and timely feedback and reciprocal engagement in learning. If they met in all 6 periods, then what would happen is a student could see a teacher on Monday, but then not again have in-person contact with that teacher until the following Monday. And we know that adequate and timely feedback is more personal, and we feel it would be better if they were to meet with the teachers during those two times a week instead of 1. We also have a 90-minute blocks, which allow educators to cover more material in one setting. So if we had 6 periods in 1 week, with only seeing them 1 time, it would be harder to get some of that material across to students in a more focused way. For structure and support academic balance, after distance learning in the spring, something that we heard from students and parents is it was really hard to balance and organize 6 classes per week with all the work that was happening, with the learning that they needed to do, the learning when to be online with teachers, and what homework to do and what work to do offline. And then trying to get everything turned in, it was hard to balance that with 6 periods. And so that is one reason that we are moving to 3 periods for 1 week and the next 3 periods the following week. And it's also so that we can allow students a little bit more reflection, get some more feedback, and really engage with that material as they are moving through, again, 2 weeks of material in 1 week. Also, we believe that in this 3-period block, when we look at relationships, because students and teachers will be together essentially 5 days of that week, 2 in-person, 3 distance learning, we feel like we'll have the opportunities to really develop connections and form relationships. And we really think that even in the weeks where they're not in that class, there will be opportunities for students to do some outline work and also have connections with staff if they have questions. When they're not in their first hour class, it might not be that week, but they'll still be able to have connections during those other weeks with their teachers. So we believe that this is a model that's really going to help us build relationships with our students and staff.
Thank you. So a major component of our planning has been health and safety. And I would like to invite both Megan McMahon and Julie Osterbauer to join us right now to talk about our prevention and screening and cleaning.
All right. This is Megan McMahon. I can start out. So one of the things, of course, that students and staff will be doing is they will be wearing masks or face coverings. All students and staff will be expected to wear a face covering when they are in buildings and on transportation. We will be providing training for staff and students, and posters will be hung for reminders on safe and clean face covering use. And then another component of this too is the COVID-19 symptoms and screening. So families and staff will be expected to conduct daily health screening at home prior to building entry. And this aligns with current CDC recommendations. They are recommending that the screening takes place at home. So guidance will be sent to families and staff regarding COVID-19 symptoms to check for. And we'll also have posters hung at all of the entrances of the buildings that will instruct people not to enter the building if they're experiencing any symptoms of COVID-19. If any students are experiencing symptoms, they'll be instructed to notify the health office, and health office staff will go through guidance with them on how long the student would need to be excluded from school. And then the length of exclusion as well, we will be following all MDH, Minnesota Department of Health guidance. And this is the area that will become really tricky because of the challenges with exclusion that will present. It'll be really important for the community to know that even if we're starting with a hybrid model, at any time an individual student may need to quarantine for 14 days, or it could happen with classroom exposure. So that's why having this flexibility built in and people being able to do distance learning when they need to will be really critical. So, and then finally, we'll have lots of systems in place in the health office to keep sick students away from well students, including isolation spaces in all of our buildings. So if someone has symptoms of COVID-19, we'll have a specific space that they will go. And then we'll request that all families, if you have a student that is sick when they're at school, that you come pick them up within 30 minutes of being called. So those are some of the major components with the health symptoms and screening.
Thanks, Megan. Julie?
Yeah, as far as cleaning goes, you know, we're training the custodial staff now on proper ways to disinfect. We will be disinfecting bathrooms every 2 hours, more if needed. You know, we've got a, you know, short staff during the day. We only have one person at our elementaries, and, you know, we'll have 2 at our secondary schools. So I think it's going to be a lot with lunches and everything like that. I am right now looking at electrostatic disinfecting machines that, you know, we can actually wheel around a 5-gallon bucket, and the electrostatic actually just clings. It'll even get to the back side of things that you spray. That's something that we would do every night, and we could probably use that in the bathrooms during the day too. But then the entire building will be disinfected every night.
Thanks. Julie, could you also talk a little bit about, I know we've had some questions about air filtration also.
Yes. First thing I want to say is schools' HVAC systems are not designed like a medical facility. You know, we don't have the filtration that a hospital has, or the, you know, frequent air changes. One air handler at our school, you know, can take care of probably 7 to 8 classrooms. So what we use for filters, we have a antimicrobial. It's like a really sticky stuff on the backside of our filters that will catch fungus, molds, bacteria. We change filters every 4 months, more if needed. You know, that's something we've really kept up on doing. As far as airflow in the classrooms, I think in the last 3 years, we've really seen a lot of progress in getting some of our old HVAC equipment repaired and fixed. You know, our buildings, the OH Anderson is 56 years old, high school is 50 years old, middle school is 30 years old. And if anybody has an issue, I want to know about it because I do have the funds to take care of this stuff.
Okay, thanks, Julie.
Yeah. Can I say one more thing?
Sure, go ahead.
I've heard a few questions of people asking about, you know, why can't we open our outside air dampers? You know, these systems are balanced. We can open outside air dampers in the morning, get that cool morning air in. But once we start either heating or air conditioning, then those outside air dampers will go to a minimum. You know, so we are required to have an outside minimum, which is anywhere between 10 and 15% outside air coming in at all times, even in the winter. So I do want people to know that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
There we go. So additional health and safety, oops, I went too far. I want to talk about some other, sorry, Jeff, nope, some other noteworthy practices with, I think Scott Brisky, our principal from Wildwood Elementary, was going to speak to this slide.
All right, thanks, Barb. Good evening. So I want to talk about a little bit about the health and safety and other noteworthy practices that will be happening inside of the school building. All schools will have a new classroom configuration and school spaces. For example, here at Wildwood, we have tables, and in the hybrid model, we do need to be 6 feet apart for social distancing. We're planning on bringing some desks down and also using some other sitting apparatuses so that we can make sure that our students are 6 feet apart. We want to increase the use of outdoor learning spaces. We want to make sure that our students are using those outdoor learning spaces and going outside as much as possible. Use of social distancing and stickers and traffic flow arrows so that we are crossing paths as least as possible and make sure we're all moving in the right direction. We'll have signage will be displayed on our buildings regarding hygiene, mask, and other COVID-19 prevention measures. We'll have plexiglass for our offices and then also for some of our small learning areas and for some of our interventionalists and some of our teachers that work with small groups of students. We'll have increased hand washing and sanitation stations. At the elementary levels, we'll be staying with the same cohort while they are in the building, and that's their classroom. And no large gatherings, won't be having assemblies or anything like that. We have some great ideas about how to build that class or build that school-wide community digitally, but we won't be doing assemblies and things like that. We'll be limiting the building visitors, and we will have a different entrance and exit for each of the grade levels. On an individual basis, we want to make sure that we're not spreading germs, so we will have individual supplies for students, individual technology devices for all students and staff. We'll make sure we're going to use backpacks for the materials, and you may have noticed we pulled the supply list off, and we're going to start working on, with this new model, school supplies that would help our students learn best in the hybrid learning model.
Great, thank you. We also have some health and safety information to share with you regarding transportation and nutrition services with Jeff Priest, who is our Director of Finance and Operations. You're muted right now, Jeff.
All right. Thank you, Barb, and good evening. The biggest change, obviously, for transportation is in that first bullet. Under the hybrid model, we are required to operate buses at 50% capacity. So when we took a look at that, I guess based on last year's planning numbers or last year's ridership, that means we're probably going to add 4 to 5 buses to our current routes or the routes we had in place last year. So that comes with a price tag of about $250,000. Some of the things we're putting in place to mitigate that cost On each of the school enrollment forms, we're asking parents to indicate if they will be requiring transportation services. So we can use that data. That should help us be able to route more efficiently. We're also going to establish and we have none in the district currently, but we're going to establish a walk zone at the secondary level. And it comes about because St. Andrews is going to allow us to utilize that upper parking lot. We can bike through that upper lot down to the school, bike, walk. We'll also use it as a drop-off area. So there's about 60. So we want to establish a walk zone off of to the west and north of that entrance. I think it's off of East Avenue. So we go north of Stillwater Road, east of Warner, south of Hickory will be the kind of the quadrant for that walk zone. So there's about 67 secondary students that are in that area. So I did a drive from I guess the most northwest corner, so Warner and Hickory, to the entrance of St. Andrews off of East Avenue, and it's about a half a mile. So I'm assuming from there maybe another half a mile into the school. So again, establishing that walk zone will certainly help with mitigating some of those increased transportation costs. We also, I guess I'll skip over to then food service. I'm thinking the food service program, actually the way we're going to be required to run it, it'll probably look a lot like last year before the onset of COVID and our distance learning. So we will be preparing and serving meals out of each of the kitchens at the schools. We found out on Tuesday afternoon that we need to run that program under the old traditional, call it type A regular lunch. So we'll be preparing out of the kitchens, a hot meal. We'll have a prepackaged breakfast, and then the regular type A meals in the afternoon for lunch. I think the difference obviously will be, so I say it looks a lot like last year, with the exception of elementary students will be taking their lunches back to their classroom. At the middle school and high school, but we'll be able to accommodate students in various spaces around the cafeteria.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Oops. So we also want to be able to talk to you a little bit about essential care, the Mahtomedi Adventure Club, and preschool. And Kate Anderson, our Director of Community Education, is going to talk about that with us. Kate.
Good evening. Good evening. So based on the executive order that Governor Walz gave out last week, childcare will be provided to our Tier 1 essential workers children, which are school-age children up to 12, on their designated distance learning days during the traditional school day, which is 7:45 to 1:15 p.m. for free. Those Tier 1 workers will need to designate that they'll be requesting care for that on their district enrollment form that will be coming out in the next several days. I think maybe tomorrow, sorry. And also, which is different from how we ran care in the springtime, is district staff will contact the qualified Tier 1 families once their distance learning day has been assigned. So that will be coming out later in August. And then you'll see there's a list of a variety of different essential workers that are able to use that care. We also have the Mahtomedi Adventure Club, which is our traditional before and after school care. And because we have that time change, we will be offering care from 1:15 to 5:30 p.m. for families based on a fee, and it is based on your enrollment and the capacity of staff and building space. I also oversee the preschool, and you will see that our map, we call it, will have an adjusted schedule based on the elementary learning model. And if you're a preschool family and you want to see that, you can go onto the website and check that information.
Terrific, thank you.
Thank you.
So just a couple more slides that I want to share with you quickly. So we are recommending a base hybrid learning model, but we may experience in-person and distance learning 2.0 at some point during the school year. And again, I mentioned at the beginning of this that our elementary and secondary schools may be in two different models during the year. And I mentioned that because, again, that wasn't something we were anticipating. And when we found that, we discovered we had some difficulties in terms of operations. And so I just want to highlight a little bit of that here. So our elementary, because our elementary and secondary schools may be in two different learning models, here's an example of what that could look like. If elementary schools are in person and secondary schools are in hybrid, we still need to work with the end times on all of that. And so we may have a situation where even though we're in person, and we've talked about elementary being in person until 2:15, if secondary is in hybrid, we are going to need to have elementary school, elementaries in school until 1:15 due to transportation and busing. And so I just wanted to kind of mention that to you about why that is, why that could look a little different than our initial planning. So with that, I don't know if the best idea is to stop and have questions about this, or if you would like us to review the other learning models at this time, because again, we could be in any of these models at any time. So I'll stop and just ask that question of you. We have a few more slides to go through all the different models.
Right, Barb, since we'll be making a resolution for the opening model, I think we need to see all the models. So what I'm thinking is if we could finish these slides, and I'd like to take a short 5-minute recess so we can all stretch and gather our thoughts for a moment, and then come back for the Q&A would be my plan.
Okay, terrific. All right, so with the in-person learning model, I'm going to start, but we're going to start by talking about what that would look like within the elementary. And Susie Prather, principal of OHA, will be coming on to go through that with us.
Thank you. So the in-person model for our elementary schools, there'll be some parts that look similar to the past and some changes. So our school day would be running from 7:45 to 2:15 if we're all in that in-person model. But as Barb had shared before, if middle school and high school are in that distance, we would have that shortened schedule at that 1:15 for the end of the day. So if we're in different models, secondary at hybrid, and we're in-person, we would have that shortened day and the specialists virtual. The way that it would look, kids would come 5 days a week. All kids in the homeroom would come, so all 23 kids would come. We'd have a similar master schedule that we've had in the past. So at the elementary level, there'd be the morning meeting. You would have your traditional lessons in literacy, math, science, social studies. You'd have your specialist classes built in there. You'd have your what I need time or intervention time, just a typical school day with specialists during the day, unless we need to adjust that end time. What you're going to see different is really that health and safety measures that Scott had spoken about earlier. So at the elementary level, kids will be eating lunch in their classroom cohorts. Recess will be in their cohorts, so we're lucky we have a lot of green space to section people off. We'll have staggered entry and exit times to really stop that congestion of kids. We still won't have the large gatherings. We'll do that virtually, as Scott had said, like our Zephyr time and speakers and things like that. Masks will be happening in school and on buses. We'll be encouraging that social distancing, that strong hygiene practices, and those enhanced cleaning going on. And then we also will have MAC, as they spoke before, after school during that in-person model until 5:30.
Thank you. And then the secondary schedule?
As Susie talked about with the elementary, the secondary schedule would be much like what had been if this was I guess, normal year. Our school day would be from 9 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. We would have 5 days of continuous learning. All secondary students would attend in person Monday through Friday, and students would attend classes in a more traditional 6-period day with about 50 to 52-minute class periods. You'd also have, here at the middle school, we would also have a designated Zephyr time, as well as at the high school, possible flex times and advisories at the high school. However, what would be different is we would be having, again, lunch, and they would be eating lunch in cohorts, and so that we could keep them more together. We would have staggered entry and exit passing times, alternate passing times between classes. Again, we still would have no large gatherings. We would be working with our students on hygiene practices. We would still require masks, and really not allow kids to have lockers during the school day. They would have their backpacks with them during the school day. When the weather gets cold, they might have to go to the lockers in the morning or afternoon for jackets, but otherwise they will just go from class to class. And then also in enhanced safety and cleaning guidelines, we would keep that up and be very cognizant of how we're working with that.
Thank you. So I did highlight this earlier, that we are talking about distance learning 2.0, and that it will look different than what we had in the spring. I did talk through this earlier, and so I'll just leave this here as as just kind of a screen to look at, since I've already gone through it all, and I know it's hard to listen for this long. But I do want to just highlight that we are really focusing on scheduling, how live and recorded instruction is used, relationships, how we are going to build connections with classmates and teachers if we're in distance learning, and instruction. And we have a commitment to rigorous instruction and personalized feedback and support. And so with that, I'm going to ask Scott Brisky to talk a little bit about our distance learning 2.0 model at the elementary school.
All right, thanks, Barb. So at O.H. Anderson and Wildwood Elementary, we'll start at 8 o'clock and go till 1:30. We'll have our weekly schedule be 5 days a week of continuous learning, and all elementary students would participate in the distance learning model Monday through Friday. For a digital platform at Wildwood Elementary, we would use Seesaw, and Seesaw has done some really cool updates this summer, especially since last spring when we used it, and so that's awesome. O.H. Anderson students will be using the Google Classroom platform. We will have continuous learning every day. That's something that we really want to make sure that we do. We want to make sure that the learning does continue. It would be online daily instruction with teachers based on a regular schedule. We have face-to-face and recorded lessons, as Barb said, to provide flexibility. We have small group instruction and independent practice and feedback built into our learning model.
Thank you. So for the distance learning 2.0 at the secondary, Justin Hahn.
Thanks, Barb. So again, just going to go through the logistics as Scott just did for the elementaries. Our school day.
Justin, I'm going to just stop you.
Justin, model would look like a 9 to 2:30 model. Yep.
Can you hear me? It's hard to hear you. You're breaking up quite a bit. So
okay.
if I were to, oh, there, you're back. Do you want to try again? And if it breaks up, can I ask Mike to go through it? Is that okay?
Or Justin, if you turn on the camera, that would make the bandwidth better. If you just turn your camera off, it should fix the sound.
Okay. Can everyone hear me okay now?
Oh yeah, that's great.
Okay. Thank you, Lucy, for that suggestion. So our school day in a distance learning model 2.0 would be 9 a.m. to 2:30. And one of the things that we took into consideration is that if at any point in time we were to move between what the base recommended model is from hybrid to a distance learning 2.0 model, we wanted that to be a seamless transition. And so it'd be the exact same. We'd be doing the hours or periods 1, 3, 5 in a week, and students would be in that 3-period block schedule. And so again, part of that reasoning is to build those relationships in a distance learning model if we were in that ever, and also to get to that depth and rigor and to provide those exceptional learning experiences for students. So what this looks like in a weekly schedule, 5 days a week of continuous learning, all secondary students would participate in distance learning Monday through Friday. The platform that we would be using would be Google Classroom. So again, similar to what we used in the spring, but again, teachers have become much more adept at what they, what they did from the springtime. Distance learning format will be continuous learning every day, online, daily instruction with teachers based on a regular schedule, face-to-face and recorded lessons, again, to provide that flexibility, online small group instruction, and independent practice and feedback.
Terrific. And so we mentioned earlier that families may request a distance learning plan if they do not wish to participate in in-person learning. And so, and also if students need to quarantine, they would use distance learning during their exclusion period. And so with this, just if there's anything that you would want to highlight in elementary or secondary with this distance learning plan, the family choice, that would be a little bit something else to add. Susie, would you?
Yep, so in the elementary level, it will look similar to what Scott described in our distance learning plan. We'll have that same schedule of the 8 to 1:30 using the same platforms of Seesaw and Google Classroom. The same learning that's happening, we want to make sure that we have that ongoing daily instruction with teachers, that face-to-face and recorded lessons for families that need that, and that small group instruction with that immediate feedback and practice for kids. This will be enrollment dependent, so we are looking at this enrollment to see if we're making a whole class. That's kind of the best case scenario for our distance learning teachers. So we would like assign a class and one teacher would be their homeroom teacher for that model, is what we're looking like at the elementary level.
And then Justin, what would be different at the secondary? What would you add to that in terms of this conversation?
Yeah, very similar to what Susie just talked about with, if you look at that instructional model, again, those same expectations with the format, with continuous learning, there'd be face-to-face, there'd be the flipped classroom concept, just to provide that flexibility, all the different things we just mentioned with distance learning, but the instructional model, again, it's dependent upon the enrollment. And so what we're looking at is if we can do a live stream and have a regular class. So if that student that is opting into distance learning was scheduled for, world history, for example, that if depending upon, again, that enrollment piece, they might be able to either live stream, or if we have a number of staff members who are wanting accommodations too, we would assign them a class. So similar to what Susie had just said at the elementary level. And again, it's dependent upon that enrollment and what we get back in those enrollment forms.
And again, especially at the high school level, there would likely be, I'll just suggest that there will likely be some combination for those people who sign up for a distance learning plan. There would likely be a combination of a class that you're taking as completely distance learning and everyone in the class is distance learning. And there might be a class where you are joining kind of in a streaming, joining the class and the class is present. So just because of all the different choices at the high school. And so next steps, we are going to be sending out an enrollment form tomorrow, asking families to let us know what their intentions are by August 12th in terms of whether they will join us in person or in a distance learning format. And we need this as soon as possible because it will help us build our cohort groups and assign distance learning days. We are intending to do everything we can to keep families together, and that is a question on the enrollment form. And so that's going to take some doing. So we're asking you to get back to us as soon as possible so that we can start working through enrollment and how we're going to schedule students. We do have our web page where you can get more information. We are starting to assemble an FAQ document based on common questions that we've received so far. And so that is out there as well. And then you can also watch the video overviews from our principals who went into some detail in each of their buildings. You got kind of a high level here, but you can get some more information from our principals. And with that, that is all that we have to present. That's all, you know, after an hour and a half. I know we don't usually have such a long presentation, but we did have quite a bit that we wanted to share with you, and we're happy to, after the break, have conversation about the details so that you can feel like you have as much as we can have at the moment. And I will mention that too, because when things have changed over time, and we anticipate that they will continue to change. And so as they do, we will respond to those changes and the guidance that we get from the governor and Department of Health and Department of Education. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Barb, and thank you, the entire team, everyone who presented. It was a very long but comprehensive presentation to the board, and I think many of the questions, I know board members have been in conversation with you, Barb, individually and through email, asking lots of questions. So we have been asking questions pretty much nonstop since June, and you've been very responsive, and I can see a lot of our questions that we have been asking have been included in that presentation. There's just two things I want to mention before we go on to this short 5-minute break so we can stretch our legs, gather our thoughts before we come back to the Q&A part, is one, that the data that Barb presented in the beginning is a starting point, and that we're really looking here at the health and safety of our students and our staff and what we're able to staff in our buildings in the different models. Our final data will not be available to August 20th. Is that correct, Barb?
Yes, that's correct, because we have to have our final learning model announced by the 24th, what we're going to open. And so the last time we'll be able to look at data is on the 20th.
So whatever we endorse tonight is the likely model, because depending on that data, if the data continues in this unfortunate trend towards higher numbers, there could be a chance that we might open differently based upon that data. I do want to share one quote with you from the incident command team that came from one of our high school seniors who was at that meeting. She said that she preferred to start on the safer side, so hopefully we can be back more in the spring. So I'm going to leave you with that quote from the student. We're going to take a 5-minute recess, and we'll reconvene at 6:58 or so for Q&A. So please take a moment, stretch, because we are not done. Six of us who are going to all be directing our questions to Barb one at a time, and then Barb will send them out to her admin team for responses and others who are on the call with us. So I'm not sure if someone's ready, if they want to get started. If each board member could maybe ask 1 or 2 questions and then let another board member have an opportunity, we'll take it just a few questions at a time. Okay, Stacey, you want to go ahead and start with 1 or 2 questions?
Sure. So I wanted to start with the air filtration system. So I really, first of all, I want to say thank you to everyone who's put all this work in. And thank you for the really thorough presentation. On the air filtration, I wondered if Julie could go into a little bit more detail about, well, I'll direct it to Barb. I'd like a little more detail on what's the highest grade filter? Do we have that? I guess I didn't know what to compare it to, what she was saying we have in place. Is it the best we can get? And it just so we can feel more assured that we have everything set in the best, highest state we could possibly achieve, kind of that best practices type of model.
Yeah, Jeff, are you there with Julie? Oh, here comes Julie. Did you hear the question, Julie?
I did hear it. Yeah, it actually is. I can check to see if we can get something. If we go denser, if we go HEPA, then we don't get the airflow that we need. So, you know, the units need to be able to breathe. You know, that adding a thicker filter, just like, I mean, just like at home, you know, sometimes, you know, I change my filters more often at home, instead of getting that heavy filter where I'm just not getting the airflow through my house that I like. And that maybe is something we can check on, is changing our filters more often. Like I say, they have that antimicrobial sticky coating on them that catches everything that goes through. So I can check on that, Stacy. I would think that would be our best bet.
Thank you, Stacy. Are there any other questions on the air filtration that we can address to Barb before we move on to another topic? Julie, go ahead.
So I think that the issue isn't as much even about filtration as it is about the movement of the air. So how something is dispersed in the room. And so, I mean, it would be like, it would have to be a specific information on how the air flowed, wouldn't it, Julie? Like in every room. I think that that's kind of been the focus about how it spreads as well, other than just filtration.
Right.
Am I wrong, or is that kind of what you've heard too?
Everything is balanced, you know. You have an air handler, and then you say you've got 5 rooms, so they balance it. Say you've got an art room next to a science room. Yeah, I mean, they're going to balance them a little different, but all of our indoor air quality, I mean, we are really sitting really good. If somebody is saying they don't have airflow, then I want to know about it, because it could be a very simple fix, but I need to know about it. I don't want them going to the head custodian. I want to know about it.
Okay.
Thank you, Julie. Anything else on air filtration? All right.
I do have one more thing to say. We do have all the balancing reports. So if there is an issue, I can look at those balancing reports and we can see if we've got a problem going on. So I have all the balancing reports, even from when the high school was built.
So Julie, I have to say, one of the great things about being a board member is you always teach us so much about buildings and maintenance and air filtration and things like that. So I always appreciate you answering our questions, because I always learn something. So thank you. And I might just want to look at those reports one day.
There you go. Come in, we'll go to lunch.
Okay, other questions from board members? Mike, go ahead, and then we'll go to Kevin.
I wanted to go back to the elementary schools again. Just a quick question. This model is it all the kids going to school at the same time? Is that the first choice, and then there's a second choice? Is that what it was?
No, what we are recommending is a hybrid model, which keeps us at the, well, I can ask Susie and Scott to join in, but no, we are recommending the hybrid model, not all students coming back. Do you want me to go back to that slide where, okay. Susie, did you want to just give the high points?
I just wanted to say the hybrid is having, remember we had like 17 of the kids that are accessing it 4 days a week. And then the other 5 would be distance learning the other day. So it's a way to make sure that we're keeping that social distancing and that reduced capacity and making sure we're safe with that.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Kevin, if you would go next. And then Judah, I'm going to check in with you after Kevin speaks to see if you have a question, because I can't see your face.
Thank you.
I know we've touched on this a little bit in the nice presentation we've had, thorough presentation we've had, but what will be the process going forward on determining us moving potentially from one learning model to another? Sure.
I think this would be a good conversation for all of us to have, actually. You know, certainly if we have direction from MDH to either to switch to a different learning model by classroom or by school, we would need that, and that would be related to if we had some kind of outbreak or there was something that they recommended in terms of going more restrictive. But in terms of, I think it would be wise for us to have a plan for our process for just watching as we watch the the numbers, the data that we're given in terms of COVID cases by county, if we were to have a process that we would like to use. I think I'd open that up to you.
Thank you. Judy, do you have a question?
I do. I'm concerned about the cleaning. We're bringing all these little kids back, but they're rotating through the classrooms. They're not all the same kids all the time. And I'm not hearing anything about adding additional custodial staff, because how do we really sanitize a classroom every single day?
Yeah, thanks, Judy. So you're talking about at the secondary level, we did bring it down to three class periods, but you're right, they would be switching to a different class, and though we will have traffic patterns that prevents the gathering, it is still the case that we would have the kids go from one class to another. And so Jeff, can you talk a little bit? So Judy's question has to do with increasing our staffing with regards to cleaning abilities.
Just during the day now?
During the day. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't see increasing staffing during the day, only at night, because we have to disinfect the entire building. That's why I'm looking at these electrostatic disinfecting machines. So bathrooms and things like that could be done. But I think as far as classrooms, that's where we may have to ask the teachers, you know, have a disinfectant and paper towels in their classroom, where they could possibly just spray it on the desk. The disinfectant I've got has it kills everything in 1 minute. So there's some out there that it takes 5 minutes. This takes 1 minute. That's why we'd like to ask the teachers for a little bit of help during the day to keep their classrooms virus free.
Well, I'm still thinking about the elementary kids, though. These sitting through, they're not the same group every.
Right. So then at night then, so you'll have 17 students, say, in the classroom all day together in elementary.
Right. And tomorrow there'll be a different 17.
Well, it'll be, so there's a total of 20, 23 that we talked about total. That's the cohort. And so that's why we're talking about hiring, and what you just heard from Julie was hiring to clean at night.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have that staff available. So right now we can't disinfect every single night the way that we should. Not
without additional staff.
Right. And I am checking into that with my temp agency Express personnel right now. They actually, I know we have one guy, they have one person for us, associate, and they're thinking they can, get us at least one additional 8 hours for the high school, one additional 8 for the middle school, and then we would have an additional 2 to 4 at the 2 elementaries.
Same question about the buses. It's been difficult for years to hire bus drivers, and most of them are retirement age. If we're doubling our buses, what is our plan about bus drivers?
Jeff, can you speak to that?
Yeah, sure can. Yeah, we're not doubling the number of routes. I think I mentioned that, and this is based on prior year ridership. We would be potentially adding 4 to 5 new routes. So it's not doubling. We have I think we have 18 regular routes last year. So we're not looking at adding another 18. And I've been in contact with the bus company. They have, right now, they've got all their drivers coming back. They had a contract in the same company had a contract in the Stillwater district. Stillwater didn't renew that contract, so we've got drivers from the Stillwater district as well. So, well, that was just probably yesterday. I was talking to the facility manager, and she said they've got enough drivers. They're good to go.
I'm impressed.
But it's a good point, Judy. I appreciate the point, because one of the things that we talked about with with determining our model does have to do with staffing. And so while we're using our numbers as our initial planning, we do need to look at staffing as part of this picture as well. And can we staff to be able to do all the things we're saying we're going to be able to do? So it's a good point, and it's something we are doing our best at understanding at this point, but we may find something different as we go on. So that will be a component to all of this.
And my other question is, we have said our teachers who want to teach long distance can, but I haven't seen anything in the plan about how many of those teachers want to do that, and what is our ability to allow them to do that.
Yeah.
You know, we're assuming people are coming back, but I don't think they're all coming back.
Yep. So I'll call Nicole to join us for this one. It's not that everyone who wants to work from a distance can. But Nicole can speak exactly to the specifics of that.
Right. And so what the process that I had a little bit on my slide was just working with folks that have compromised or underlying health conditions in particular. And so we have to work with those folks to see what kind of accommodation they do need. It could be work from home, but it could also be other accommodations that we're putting in place, such as the PPE, the type of hybrid model, for example, where you have less kids in social distancing. So it really depends on each person, which makes this a very more complicated, I would say, and time consuming, but it's important to treat each person based on what their condition is and finding out what that work accommodation is. And even in some districts, I know it could be a leave of absence for that person if, you know, having students in the classrooms or in the buildings and they don't want to be there without that type of work accommodation, they may be going that route as well. So we're just starting that process, but we want to try to be as flexible as we can and figure that out for people that do need something.
How many people have you had requested?
Right now, it was as of Tuesday, but it's still open right now. So folks are deciding those things with their doctors and letting me know. But we had about 16 teachers on Tuesday was the last set of data that we had. So we're working through those. They have time to work with their doctors until Sunday. And then I'll be working with principals to figure out, working through each one actually individually.
So again, this is an item that we won't have an answer to until we have data, and we can't do that until we choose a learning model. So some of our questions start to be very cyclical of, right, what about this? Well, we don't know. Should we do this and continue that? So those are really great questions, Judy. I'm going to move on to some other board members and I'll circle back to you. So I'm not leaving you forever, but I will circle back. Julie, we haven't heard from you. Did you have a question or two that you want to ask?
Yes. If we could have Barb just highlight one more time to explain for everyone to understand greater in depth about why we changed the start times for the elementary.
Yeah, you bet. So we started with, we had concern about being able to clean between our MAC program and the start of school, to be able to clean and to be able to so if I step back one more, we wanted to maximize the number of elementary students that we could bring in for in regardless of what, whether it's in person or in hybrid. And so starting there, in order to bring back, based on our capacity limits, in order to bring back as many students as possible, we had to spread our classrooms out throughout the building and use spaces that we wouldn't typically use. It's also the case that our school age care MAC program also needs to use classrooms because they need to keep their sizes small as well. And so we did not feel confident in our abilities to be able to maintain those health and safety protocols between that early morning MAC and then transitioning to school. And so we decided that we would not offer MAC in the morning. But we also knew that we had quite a few students, and I can ask Kate because I'm not remembering the number, whether it was almost 200 students that had signed up for morning care. And so in order to support the working families who needed that care, we moved the start time to earlier so that they could still have that coverage. and then hopefully be able to accommodate families through after school care. I recognize that this is something that, you know, by taking care of one thing, we pushed out some issues for others as well. But that's the reasoning for the change, and that was specifically a health and safety decision, and to try and support those families that we knew needed care in the morning.
Are there other questions on the start time before you go on, Julie? Kevin, go ahead.
So also I'm interested in that we heard from a number of parents that, is this something that will be just during this time period of having to make these changes to be able to do what we need to do to accommodate the learning under these unusual circumstances? So are we then would go back to what we have had pre-COVID, so that, because we've had, you know, a few years ago, we've had the school start time conversation and ultimately didn't change. So I just wanted to allay people's fears that this wasn't just, you know, we're going to do it now and then we're just going to slide into that. Can you clarify that for me, anyone?
Oh, me? Yeah, so sorry. Yeah, yes. So that is the intent, is that this is to take care of our issue with the pandemic. And it wasn't, it was never, and it is not an attempt to just change the start times and to sneak it in or whatever, however you just framed it. It truly is something that we thought was in the best interest to both maximize our face-to-face in-person instruction for students and to support our working families. This is the reason, and to also adhere to those health and safety guidelines. This is the reason we did it, so.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
So Julie, did you have a second question before we move back to Stacy?
So yeah, just one more question, Barb. So this is really not related to which model we're choosing, just a point of clarification on the plan for the secondary. Mm-hmm. So is there evidence that this is a good model to choose? Is this something that you've heard a lot about? Just any feedback on the model we chose? And I appreciate all of Mike's explanation about why you chose it. I'm just curious if you've seen it anywhere else.
So Mike and Justin, you can join me, because I know you've had a lot of conversations with, if you want to put your cameras on and come on in. I know you've had a lot of conversations with secondary principals about trying to come up with a model as well. Certainly there are a number of districts that do use block scheduling on a regular basis. And Ann Gary's in here too. I'm just gonna, Ann, if you don't mind joining us for a little bit too. I know there's some experience with block in the past prior to my arrival here. I don't know if there's even something Ann might be able to speak to, but among the three of you, are there some things that you would want to share about block scheduling?
I can probably start. And yes, for about the last 6 weeks, I've been part of a cohort. We've been having a middle school cohort of principals from 6 different districts. And we've been meeting every Wednesday at 11 o'clock and just kind of sharing ideas and going through all the processes, and that's been happening in other districts as well. And I can tell you, yesterday we met and we had 5 different districts online at the time. And 4 of the 5 were in the block schedule. A couple of them were doing the shortened 3 periods a week. A couple of them were still going to try the 6 periods a week, that sort of thing. But again, it's something that I think as us principals are looking at trying to deliver the education for students, as well as some of the allies and some of those, and meeting the needs of kids and building relationships. I think more and more districts, as they were talking, realize that the block schedule in this type of pandemic is the way to go to try to meet the needs of students the best.
The schools I was in contact with, very similar to what Mike was saying. the South Wash and schools and Mounds View schools, the thinking, I think, initially was, trying to provide that 6-period day if they could, and then realizing through the health and safety component that it wasn't going to work, and that to minimize those transitions and to comply with the other pieces from MDH and MDE, that going to a block schedule was going to be more beneficial.
And I know I called on you, and and you don't have to have anything. So I want to say we've got Ann Gary here, who is the president of our Education Association, and I have really valued having Ann just pick. I could call her. I've been calling her all summer just to run things by her and ask her questions and get her opinion on things, and she's always been super receptive to try and help me think through things. So. And publicly, I want to thank you for all that you've done to support our team this summer and help us think things through. So thanks for that. I don't know if you have anything else about the block, but I know you and I have talked about block scheduling in the past. So
I would just add to, can you hear me? Because I know my earphones weren't working that great before. Okay.
Yep.
So I just want to add to what Justin said. And that would be, when he surveyed the staff at the high school, because that's where I teach, so I'm just going to speak to that it was very important that teachers wanted to see the kids at least twice a week. And so this model, without the transitions of the 6-period day, which we've deemed isn't safe for so many transitions, we've decided, that the block schedule will work better for fewer transitions, and we still will see our students twice a week.
thank you.
Anything else on schedules before we move on to the next topic? Stacy, go ahead.
So I appreciate all the thought that went into this. I see a lot of benefits to this schedule. I do wonder, I have a couple of questions about it. Because it's so different, will there be professional development or tools or any kind of guidance as to how to use the 90 minutes since it's so different from how teachers have been doing it? And then my other question will be about Phi-Ed and what 90 minutes of Phi-Ed looks like, and will we have masks, or if I just really would like a little bit more detail on that part of it, more in regards to the health piece.
So I'm going to start, since Mike is on. Mike, if you want to just talk, I know you and I talked a little bit about Phi-Ed and music and different ways that you might look at that at the middle school level. And then Lynn, can you join us to talk about professional development while Mike is addressing Phi-Ed?
Yep, and I can start by, if there's a 90-minute block, and we have, right now our kids will have on 1 hour, on one day they'll have Phi-Ed, the next day they'll have a music class or something that's opposite of that. And I talked to the Allied Arts teachers yesterday, talked about some of the complexities of our schedules, and then I meet with them next week, and we'll be talking about possibly making kind of what they call skinnies, where you would have 45 minutes of Phi-Ed, and then you would go 45 minutes to band or to choir and so forth. So we're breaking that 90 minutes up, having one more transition for just those kids that are in that class. So they'll be the only kids in the hallway, and they will be the ones that will have just 45 minutes. That's also a possibility. We've also talked about having band at home and a distance learning on those distance learning days when kids are not in person because of all the blowing and the stuff that comes with instruments and so forth. Ms. Najalik is concerned about that. And so we've talked about what we can do to have those kids at home and yet then have the kids when they are here be in Phi-Ed. But then we'll also know that 90 minutes is going to be a lot. We also know that when kids are distance learning from Phi-Ed, they will be in the spring. Our Phi-Ed department worked hard on doing some lifelong learning around some Phi-Ed, some some physical activity that they would continue to do with those kids as well. So we do understand that that's a concern, and that is a long time, especially if there's only 14 kids in the class to have 90 minutes. And so those are things that we still have to develop and work through.
And I can add a little to the instructional leadership teams that we have. We are very fortunate to have such strong teacher instructional leaders and administrators. And this year we're going to focus in on what does that look like within the block schedule? What does distance learning look like? What are some of the best practices? Since last spring, they've come out with a lot of resources on the distance learning kind of playbook, and it was by Fisher, Fry, and Hattie, and we're looking at that and really diving into that at the beginning of the year, and then now throughout the school year, and breaking down what does engagement look like in a block setting. What does what are some of the tasks that you would want to choose, and at that time, how would you divide up your lessons? Would you want 2 or 3 mini lessons? Looking at what is the clarity and the learning targets that you have that are set for that particular chunk of time. What kind of feedback would you be giving the students, and what are the assessments pieces that you're looking at? So we're going to start to really, well, teachers are right now already working on some of these things, but we are going to have that focus with our instructional leadership teams, and we have a leadership team in every building. So.
Okay, thank you. Can I just follow up on that?
Mm-hmm.
When you mention assessments, I'm guessing, but I just like, if we have kind of an idea of what it looks like, would that be, they'll probably be assessed in a timely manner, given it would be unlikely that they would have to go a week without having that class and then assessments the following week. I think it would be nice for people to feel assured that, yes, this is a model that's been in place and there's kind of a rhythm to it, but it's just a guess on my part. So like a little bit more affirmation that that's how it goes.
Yeah, and there's different kinds of assessments. There's just, more of a formative assessment that they'll be able to check to see how students are doing, more informal. There's some more of the summative assessments that maybe you're referring to that are like the traditional tests that kids are used to. It will look different because they're looking at maybe it's project-based learning that they're working on within that class, and what does that assessment look like? So yes, the teachers will be continually assessing the students as they go through, but it just depends on what their particular learning target is, of what that assessment would look like. But yeah, but that will be work that we'll be working on through the whole year. So.
Thank you. Other questions from board members? Kevin, go ahead, and then Judy, I'll check in with you again.
Okay, and I know this has been, it's been touched on.
We lost you, Kevin.
We lost your, mic. We can't hear you.
Hold on.
Yep, there you are.
Yeah. Oh, okay. It says my internet connection is unstable. Hopefully it's not talking about me. So, we've talked about the idea of being cognizant of what's happening in surrounding counties. And as you nicely illustrated, just that, how do we determine what our experience rate is in Washington County and the 2-week rolling number. But we do have students coming from other counties through open enrollment. And so I think we need to, again, I've gotten some of what you've said today about taking that into consideration, because the idea is that we should react to the counties that have the worst experience rate. Mm-hmm. But now what I'm understanding is that we will use that as a factoring piece in our decision making. Is that fair assessment?
Right, that's the guide. That would be a guideline. So when we think of that, I would encourage you all to see it as a guideline, and we would want to look at trends. When Megan was talking earlier, her advice from Washington County was to understand where these, was there a localized outbreak, for example, or is it community spread? And knowing those kinds of different factors would be important. So, but yes, it's a guideline and it's one factor in, and kind of a starting point. I guess I'd say it's a starting point, and then there are a number of other factors to that, which again, would bring me back to one of the things that you asked, Kevin, is when do we make the decision to switch? And I think that, so part of that incident command team, the purpose of that is to, as an administrative team, we would go back to that group and say, here's what we have, what are you thinking? Because again, it's a group of people that have different perspectives, so that they can share those perspectives, so then I can share those with the board regarding what, if we do need to switch, why that might be, and what decisions went into that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Judy, I'm going to come back to you. I see you've unmuted yourself. Do you have more questions about making the choice of models?
Well, I still have some concerns about that elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
In that the cohort changes all the time, right?
So it's, if you think of it as a total group of 23 students, it's just not all of them are in the classroom at any one time. So it is a cohort of 23. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But on Monday, the kids in the classroom are different than the kids on Tuesday, right?
They are of that same 23. So of that 23, not all of them are present any one day. So I think the big difference is if we could be in person. So the one thing is it's this group of 23 or so that can, and the reason we are saying they can't all come to school on the same day is because we wouldn't be able to keep them 6 feet apart. And so that is the one factor that brings us down to a smaller number in our hybrid. So it is a group of 23 students total across the week.
I get that, but I just feel like we're mixing up kids all the time, and the cohort changes all the time, and we get one kid positive for COVID and the whole classroom is quarantined.
And that would be, yes, and that would be true regardless of the class. So like, even if we were at 17 all week long, that would be the case. So yes, I will say, yes, that is true. If we have a situation that is 23 students that we are talking about as that cohort. Mm-hmm. Up to 23, because we don't know how many are choosing distance learning.
True.
Mm-hmm. And I'll say, I mean, I guess I would want to be honest. There is, we have at the high school, we have we'll have a class of say 15 or so. And we have 3 different class periods during that time, and they are not the same 15 kids that are going to the same classes. So.
Which really leans on housekeeping a big deal.
Which means what? I'm sorry?
Really leans on getting those classrooms every single day re-sanitized, and I just don't see that we have the manpower to do that.
So I believe in Julie's response, so she's looking, Barb, is this correct? She's looking to get additional help through the temp agencies. She's looking to get additional cleaning methodologies in place. So it would happen that these classrooms would be cleaned every night as part of that model.
If we get the help.
Yes, that's true. Again, it's a good point, Judy. It's some of this is dependent on staffing. That is true. Mm-hmm. And so what we're requesting here or recommending tonight is our adoption of our likely based learning model. And that would be, we're saying that, and the reason we want to do this now is so that people can start planning and families can start planning, and we can start figuring out cohorts and how we would schedule them on a given day. And then from there, we'll also have to see how that works for staffing and such. So you're right, Judy. I would suggest that we wouldn't want to go forward if we can't get if we can't do the cleaning that we need to do, if we can't staff the classrooms because we don't have the staff. I mean, those are all factors, certainly. But what we're requesting here is the base learning model to get started. Mm-hmm.
Mike, go ahead. After you turn your mic on.
Okay, basically, so the 17 and 5 is going to be the same consistent group though, right?
Right.
Right. I mean, so the one day there's going to be 17 and in and 5 out. The next day that 5 will be in and there'll be another 5 out.
Right. Yep.
Okay, so it's the same group of kids the whole time.
Yep, it is. It is.
Okay. Just curious. Thanks.
Thanks for that clarifying question. Stacy, did you have something?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to follow up on the cleaning. In light of the fact that this is likely model and we would like to see this additional cleaning, I also feel like it's important that could we find money in the budget to have additional cleaning people in the daytime so that we're not asking our teachers to have to clean? Could somebody walk through with this big machine in between, and you know, maybe kids have to transition a little, you add a few minutes in between transitions. I just would like to explore that, because I don't like the thought that we, you know, if they're going to the bathroom during the day, that no one's going in and cleaning those. And I certainly don't like the idea of having to ask teachers to clean their rooms in between, because they're there to be, you know, we want them focused on teaching. So is that possible to explore that?
I think it is, yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Other questions? Kevin, go ahead.
On the idea of using St. Andrews parking lot for a walk bike area or route, would that road be then restricted from cars? I've noticed when I've been up on East Avenue that you get cars whizzing through there and there's no sidewalks. So I would kind of question the safety of the walkers and bikers.
We met with Julie Osterbauer, and I went and met with some people from St. Andrews to help us think this through and how they could partner with us. And I'm really thankful for their partnership in this. And what they've agreed is that their upper lot will be closed to vehicle traffic during school start and end times. And then they will allow us to use their lot by their sports center as an additional drop off for parents who might want to drop off their kids. Their students would still need to walk, but it would be something so that we are anticipating that we'll have increased vehicle traffic, families maybe not wanting to ride the bus. And so we were looking for different ways that we could accommodate that as well. And so there might be families who would want to drop off their students down in St. Andrews, and their students could walk a little ways. And again, that upper lot there would be closed to vehicle traffic during start and end times.
So I was at a Magi meeting on Monday. I'm forgetting what day of the week now, Monday. And there are a number of community residents and have put together some ideas for helping on the safe walking and biking for students. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's parents that are willing to help in some of that work where it's safe for them to do. They wouldn't come into school or anything, but could help on the walking buses and some of that, which then might allay some of the need for additional busing costs. Mm-hmm. So I just know that there is a number of people that are very eager to be of assistance should we want that help.
Terrific, thank you.
All right, go ahead.
You know how the Minneapolis has their biking lanes set up, you know, how they just have those little things that are sticking up and the bikes go, you know, and they're on the same space of the street. I wonder if there's some way we could do something like that too, to consider some sort of a marking system for walking and biking too, so that makes it a little more safe. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, thanks. Those have been conversations that the same group that Kevin referenced. We have a number of advocates for safe walking and biking in our community, and I know that that's something that that sort of thing or markings on the street are things that they have been advocating for with both Mahtomedi and Washington County. So certainly that's conversation that's been happening. Lucy, I don't know if you can tell that Judy has unmiked again. Okay.
Yep. Judy, do you have more questions?
I do not.
Okay. I'm just happy everyone's watching out for you because sometimes I forget. So thank you. I do want to reiterate, and Barb, correct me if I'm wrong, that we are looking to have a resolution around a potential beginning of the year model, so parents will know, and that this model is still in flux because we don't have all the information. We don't know how many teachers we'll have. We don't know how many students will have face-to-face, how many will be distant. And so as we talk about some of these details, these too could change based upon changes in recommendations from the CDC, the Health Department, the Department of Education, the Governor's Office, our numbers, and we have a whole list of groups that are providing input to our model. And some of these very detailed operational questions are really left to you and your team. They're helping us understand what it looks like. It's helping you understand where our concerns lay around student safety, around learning, and these other areas. But many of these things could still continue to shift and change. Is that right?
That's right. And so so we're calling this the likely based learning model is the phrasing we've been talking about as what we're asking for you to adopt tonight. And then all of those other factors, yes. So it allows us to start planning, and then those other factors will inform us as to whether or not we can truly open in this likely based learning model. I'll also say, you know, by doing this tonight, that allows us to work with our teachers too, who are going to be the really creative people in all of this. And so we'll have this structure that we're approving right now, and it's our best thinking based on all the process we've gone through. And then I just know our teachers, once they get going, they're going to make it better. So though we've talked about this, I just know it's going to get better once we put it in the hands of our teachers.
Stacy, do you have another question?
Yes. Since this is a likely scenario, obviously things could change even before school starts. But if things change once school starts, I guess I'm wondering two things. Will we be doing parent and teacher surveys to get feedback on mental health and our parents feeling like their kids are healthy? And also, so that's on the safety health side and that piece of it, whether we're staying in hybrid or go into distance learning. And the other piece is the educational plan, the structure of the day. Will we do surveys on that? And if for some reason the block plan isn't working because it is stressing kids out more, what will be are there backup plans in place that we would modify it to look like?
Yeah, so a couple things on that. We need to try something for long enough to know, to be able to tweak it, to be able to adapt within that structure. I wouldn't recommend changing this totally upending what we have here quickly. I think this is the kind of thing that we need to let it get started. We need to work on it, and we need to get comfortable with it. So I wouldn't be asking I wouldn't ask that specific question, does it work? But what I would be asking is, we will be asking, how are your students doing? How can we support them? What are things that we need to do? And our teachers will be doing that too. As they learn and grow with this model, they will be also having these conversations with families and with students, because again, one of our foundational components is this relationships and supporting our students. And that is best going to be served by our teachers knowing what they need and how they can support them. So my feeling is that a lot of this will be happening at the building level and at the teacher level in terms of what kids need, what kids and families need to be successful. Mm-hmm.
Other questions or thoughts before we look at the resolution? Kevin, go ahead.
From what I've been reading, potentially public schools could get some additional funding to offset any of these unexpected expenses. I don't know don't think we're quite there yet, but hopefully in the next week or so we'll have that determined. But I too want to echo the idea of, if we can allocate some money from the budget on the cleaning. I think that's just, you know, one of the foundational things out of all this is just making sure we get that cleaning done, and let's ensure that we give Julie the resources that Julie needs to do that work. And again, I too don't, you know, yeah, obviously we're all in this together. But teachers, they have a lot on their shoulders right now. So I think if we could find ways to help in the cleaning process that doesn't unduly burden the teachers, cleaning between classes, I think that would be ideal. So
absolutely.
Yeah, that would just be my thought.
You know Julie, and you know she's frugal and she works harder than anyone. And so her first reaction is always to do what she can with who she has and what she has. And so we are going to get her more and more support. And that has been a conversation that Jeff is planning within the budget to have additional support. Julie she takes a lot on herself, and she just keeps assuming it's her job and that she is going to have to figure out a way to make it work. But we are planning to have support for her and for the whole staff. So.
Other questions or comments? Stacy, go ahead.
So I just wanted to go back to if the scenario changes, and I know it sounds like we would need to do a little bit more discussion as to how that would work, but as far as this incident command team, I know that it was a group of community members pulled together. It sounds like there were parents represented. Would parents be able to participate, or were just parents selected? And
yeah, so thanks. Here's that incident command team. The purpose of that is to give some perspectives, is to share some thoughts, and to help the board make a decision, board and superintendent make the decision. It requires, so I'll just say that my intent would be to keep the team the same, the group the same, and to continue to think about all these parameters with us. That doesn't mean family. I think we've demonstrated that we have opened up to get a lot of family feedback, parent feedback in lots of different ways. And in this case, I will say that when it comes to the health and safety and switching from one scenario to another, which is what this is, which is different than the actual learning plan, what we need is a group that is going to just help us decide, and then it's up to the board and the superintendent truly to make that decision. And so that's what I would want you to know, is that incident command team is an advisory group that has different perspectives that they can share with us and help us think through, but it's really up to us to do that.
I just think if they are giving us advice, it's good for us to know who they are and how they were picked.
Yeah, so sure.
Tonight,
so,
I'm just saying as we go through the year, if they come together, it's helpful to know.
I can tell you. So I don't mind telling you now. So it was, I went to teachers union to ask for representatives. We also asked for our paraprofessional union. I knew I had Julie in there. I asked for two parents who I knew had been part of our focus groups and had given us feedback that was regards to health and safety during that time. And so it gave us some perspective that way. So I asked those two. And then I asked two of our student leaders, one who is one of the co-presidents of the SLC, and the other who is our student school board member, a student member of the representative. And then it was a lot of our representatives from our district leadership team, licensed school nurse, for example, it was in there as well. So the idea was to just have a group of people who could help us think.
Thank you.
It's not completely, I know there are more perspectives out there, but we were looking for a team to just help us think these through.
Thank you.
And then Stacy, I did the appointments as board chair of the board members, and due to my role as board chair, I put myself on there, and due to the fact that I could get sick, I'm also up for election this year. I appointed the vice chair, Julie McGraw, as the second board member because she's not up for election this year, and I hope we don't get sick at the same time. So that's how I made that selection for those two people.
Great, thanks. And then can I just make one more comment? I just want to say I really want to thank everyone who put effort into this, from the walking bus to all of the cleaning aspects to the learning models. It's a lot, the busing issues, start time, all of those issues. And I think you've done a very good job getting to this point and getting a plan together that I think will serve our students really well. And I think it'll empower the teachers to do what they do really well. So I really feel like a lot of thought has gone into this. I want to, again, echo what was said at the beginning. I really compliment the community for sharing their feelings, and sometimes very passionate, but it showed how much the community cared. And I'm just really proud of, with all the differing views, how we ended up in a really good place, and probably a better place than we would have if we hadn't been so open to so many views. So just really want to commend you and the team and everyone who had input. So thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin, go ahead.
I also want to commend the team, the Zephyr team, for very thoughtful work. I mean, when one really digs deep into this, you know, they talk about using supercomputers to model weather patterns. And this is on that, almost on that scale of complexity. The number of variables that will go into this are dizzyingly amazing. And I just, there's been this kind of level-headed, let's do this as the Zephyr team. And from the teachers, the staff, the administrators, fellow board members, community members, students, the whole kit and caboodle that calls us Zephyrs, I am just very reassured we're on the right track. Will this be easy? Probably not. Will we get through this? Absolutely. So thank you, the team.
All right, before we look at the resolution, any last questions about the different models and making a decision on models? I know after we make a resolution on the model, we were going to return to some of the questions around the distance piece, the families who are choosing to select that full time. But are there other questions about the models, the recommendation from Barb and her team to start with hybrid at both elementary and secondary before I read the resolution? All right, the resolution is in the board packet, but I'm going to read it for all, what do we have, 20 or 56 people still listening with us, of what it says so everyone understands what we are approving. I'll read it, and if someone could make the motion after that for it, then we can move forward with the process. So the resolution is adoption of a base learning model for the 2020-2021 school year and other COVID-19 related matters. Whereas Minnesota Statute Section 123B09 vests the care, management, and control of independent districts in the school board, and whereas the superintendent of Independent School District 832, hereinafter referred to as superintendent, is responsible for the management of the schools, the administration of all school district policies, and is directly accountable to the school board, and whereas when responsibilities are not specifically prescribed nor school district policy applicable, the superintendent shall use personal and professional judgment subject to review by the school board pertinent to School Board District Policy 302. Whereas on March 13th, 2020, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz issued Emergency Executive Order 20-01, which declared a peacetime emergency in Minnesota in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're not very far through this. There's a lot more to come, people. Whereas on July 30th, 2020, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz issued Emergency Executive Order 20-82 and the Safe Learning Plan for the 2020-2021, hereafter named the Safe Learning Plan, which sets forth 5 learning models: in-person learning for all, in-person learning for elementary, and hybrid learning for secondary, hybrid learning for all students, hybrid learning for elementary, and distance learning for secondary and distance learning, and authorized all school boards in the state of Minnesota to select and implement an appropriate base learning model in accordance with and subject to the Safe Learning Plan. And whereas the Minnesota Department of Education, MDE, has issued and may continue to issue written guidance for Minnesota schools on education-related issues to COVID-19, and whereas Minnesota Department of Education, or Department of Health, MDH, has issued and may continue to issue written guidance for Minnesota schools on public health issues related to COVID-19, and whereas the superintendent and the administration of the school district have conferred with the school board regarding the available learning models, the current MDE and MDH requirements for each and other relevant information, and whereas based upon the collective consideration of these factors, the superintendent has recommended to the school board that hybrid learning for all students will be the base learning model to be implemented at the commencement of the 2020-21 school year. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the school board of the Independent School District 832 as follows. The superintendent is hereby directed to implement the following base learning model to open the 2020-2021 school year: hybrid learning for all students. The superintendent is hereby authorized, after consultation with the school board chair and notification to the school board, to select and implement a different learning model for the school district or any specific school buildings without school board action if the superintendent reasonably believes that prompt implementation of a different learning model is necessary and the constraints of time and public health considerations rendered impractical to hold a school board meeting to approve the implementation. The learning model selected and implemented by the superintendent shall continue in effect unless and until the school board, in consultation with the superintendent and appropriate school district staff, public health officials, deems it in the best interest of the school district and its students to implement a different learning model. The superintendent will provide regular updates to the school board regarding the school district's efforts to implement COVID-19 related educational and public health guidance issued by MDE and MDH. I'm looking for a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
Thank you, Kevin.
Second.
Thank you, Mike. So the resolution has been moved forward by Kevin, seconded by Mike. Any other discussion on the resolution? Seeing no other discussion, I will ask Julie to do a roll call vote.
Mike Chevalier,
Aye.
Kevin Donovan,
Aye.
Julie McGraw, aye. Judy Schwartz,
Aye.
Stacy Stout,
Aye.
Lucy Payne.
The chair is aye, the motion carries. The hybrid learning plan will be the base learning model, or likely base learning model, to begin our academic year. Are there other questions related to the current situation with COVID-19 and the schools? I know we had some comments earlier about the distance learning. If students select distance learning through the survey that's coming out to families, can they opt in later at any point in time? Can they opt out? How will that be communicated to families? You might not have answers, Barb, right now, I understand that, but how will that be communicated?
We will have in the form the kind of the timeline for how long we are asking for a commitment. Right now we're talking about it as a semester, and I'm going to go and just double check that with the team, just because of the amount of work that goes into being able to schedule cohorts. And I think if we did it less than a semester, I think it would be really difficult. However, we'll also be a little bit open to what that might look like. But I think what we're asking to start with is that if you are going to choose distance learning, you commit to it for a semester to be able to allow us to plan accordingly.
So I'm going to follow up to that. Students will automatically move to distance learning though should they need to quarantine?
Right.
Or should they need to, or other things related to COVID-19, and they would not be on the semester plan, then they would be on the distance learning until their quarantine time is up or they're healthy enough to return to school.
Right, and this is why I'm asking for a little bit of grace and leeway, because the distance learning plan for students who are in quarantine, right now we are anticipating that it would look similar to joining the class from the way distance learning and hybrid. But because we don't know how many students are choosing distance learning, because we don't know exactly how we're staffing, and you heard about that earlier, we need a little bit of flexibility in what this is all going to look like. And so that is why we're asking for the semester commitment, because we need to figure out
almost
what it look like.
Right.
Okay, and then the other thing we were going to return to, I have in mind, talking about changing models. That at what point do you bring the board back together? If you could mute your mic for a moment. Okay, thank you.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we were talking about changing models and when the board should be called back together. So in the resolution, it did include a piece that there will be times where things might be moving at a pace where we can't get back together. And I understand that. We can make this agenda item. We can check in at all of our meetings on how things are going. Obviously, when we have our regular board meetings, is there more information we need on potential changing of models?
Not me.
Okay.
It's pretty self-explanatory there in section 2.
Kevin, go ahead.
Will we be looking at some additional policies upcoming? I'm thinking specifically of the MSBA recommended mask policy. Is
Yeah,
that
thanks
to
for
come?
that. I think we're going to find out what, it is the case that I think there are going to be some policies we need to look at. And masks are one. I think I'll just say that our team has started noticing things that we should probably have discussion about. And I think we're going to bring some of those to you at our next work session, which is next week. So we're going to start bringing those as they come up to you to discuss with us. And some of them will be practices, but others will be policy level. Mm-hmm.
So also, because of the timing on this, we do have board meetings already scheduled on the 13th and the 28th, I believe, is our next board meeting. If I could please ask board members to hold on their calendars the evening of August 20th. That would be the Thursday between those two meetings, in case we need to meet to support Barb and her team on implementing things and making changes to start the school year. So right now we are not scheduling that meeting, but we might need to. And so please hold that time on your calendars. Julie, you were going to add something.
So I just also was curious if possibly you needed to try to have a policy committee meeting, as it was recommended that we consider policies that maybe need to be overridden or something during this pandemic time. So I don't know what all the policies are, but that was something that the legal team told us to consider.
Could we tentatively have that on the 20th as well, as just kind of a placeholder? I'd need some more time before I'd be ready to bring many to you, but I think we'll start talking about in the work session on the 13th, potentially, if we, I don't know. We could do it. We could do policy. I guess it's up to you whether you want to do it as a full board or if you want to do it as a policy group.
I think, in the time of pandemic, we don't have a lot of time to plan. Barb doesn't have a lot of time to have additional meetings. We're trying to be responsive but lean because there's so much work to be done. And so I would prefer the policies just go straight to the full board, and to skip that practice that policy committees put in place to do a bigger look, in-depth look at existing policies. If we need policies that are reactive to the situation, I think the full board will need the whole, it would be more beneficial to do as a full board. But if Barb and I look at that over the next couple of weeks and that changes, we'll send that out.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, it was just a recommendation.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm not up for 300 pages of policy reading right now, but I would take
Neither.
anyone's recommendation. I just want to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to.
I appreciate that comment because I believe MSBA, being our professional organization, will be supporting us in this area and will pushing out the policies we need to look at.
Okay.
And so I don't think we personally as a board need to dive into our policies. Let's wait for MSBA to give us some information first, and then we'll dive into ours. And I will follow up with MSBA personally to ask them about that piece.
Okay.
So we have done action item number 5. We have no other items on our agenda. But Stacey has one more comment to make, it looks like.
Well, I had thought we were going, this was the time when we could bring up the other items.
Yep.
So
no one was saying anything. So go ahead, Stacey. Other
I'm
items.
sorry. I just wanted to go back to the block learning. As I expressed, I have some reservations with the FIA Ed piece. It sounds like they're working through it. I would like to make sure that that is finalized before we send out a scenario to parents, asking them what they're committing to for the year, just so they have an idea of what that looks like. I think obviously that goes towards physical health and mental health. And so I just want to make sure that if there's still a few little pieces that need to be figured out, which is understandable, and it sounds like it is, but just we need to make sure our parents know where those remaining issues lie.
Okay, well, I'll have to be honest with you. That won't be done before tomorrow. And tomorrow,
is it going out tomorrow?
We're sending that out tomorrow, and we're asking for people to commit by the 12th. And so I think this is the spot where I need to ask everyone to ask for a little bit of grace for everyone, because this is work that needs to be done with our teachers, and it's going to take a little bit of time to figure out some of the finer details. And we're going to be asking tomorrow for people to commit to distance learning or to be coming back in person. And we really need to get going on scheduling, because this is going to be pretty complicated, because we really do want to honor families' wishes about what if they have family members, they need to be trying to get families on the same day if that's something that they need, or maybe separate days if that's better for the family. So these are all things we want to take into consideration. There's a lot of planning to go. So I just want you to know that. I would want to be.
I appreciate that. And as you've been, I think, all along with just the transparency piece, I think if you just update whenever that does get finalized, I think that would be helpful.
Mm-hmm. You bet.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Judy, do you have another question or comment too?
I do not.
Okay, you're just ready to vote on the next motion. Any other questions or comments from board members? That would help Barb and her team finish up this planning or dive more deeply into this planning. It's gonna be a while before you finish.
Never finished, so thanks. Mm-hmm.
All right, then I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mike.
Second.
Thank you, Julie. We have a motion to adjourn, a roll call vote.
Mike Chevalier.
Aye.
Kevin Donovan.
Aye.
Julie McGraw, aye. Judy Schwartz.
Aye.
Stacy Stout.
Aye.
And Lucy Payne.
Chair's aye. We are adjourned with the final comment that I know other districts are doing the same work, and I've known board meetings in other districts to go up to 6 hours. So we are doing great at less than 6 hours. So
Definitely.
thank you so much for your thoughtful conversation, and we'll see you on the 13th. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barb.
And